Thank you for joining me on another episode of She Leads Now podcast, where we help career and entrepreneurial women gain the tools to develop a success mindset, create winning strategies, build collaborative relationships, and take bold action towards creating impact and fulfillment in their lives and careers. I'm your host, Sabine Gedeon, and I'm on a mission to awaken and activate women and emerging leaders so they can tap into their innate leadership ability, elevate their influence, and create the impact they were destined to make. If you're ready to uplevel your confidence, courage, and influence, you've come to the right place. Join me weekly for insights, strategies, and resources to help you grow, develop, and embody the leader you were meant to be, so that you can make the impact you know you are called to make and establish the legacy you've always dreamed. The world eagerly awaits the emergence of your brilliance, impact, and influence. So with that, let's dive into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of She Leads Now. I am your host, Sabine Gedeon, and I am thrilled to be bringing you episode 27. For those of you who have been listening from the very beginning when we launched earlier this year and have been consistently downloading and providing feedback, thank you so much. I really sincerely appreciate you. For those of you who maybe this is your very first episode and you are just tuning in, thank you for listening as well. I hope you gain some value from what I'm going to share today and that you continue to listen in and, of course, reach out with any feedback, any thoughts that you have around the content and the information being shared. Rightfully so, this podcast is called She Leads Now, and the focus is really to help support women in leadership, primarily women who are business owners, but also to women who are in leadership roles, whether it be in their organizations or other organizations or just in general. My philosophy around leadership, that it's not tied to a title, it's not tied to an organization or a role, it is a way of being. And so today's focus is really going to help bring that to life in the sense that we're going to talk about competencies. I'll go into a little bit more detail around what competencies are a little later. But the focus here is really around what makes some leaders effective or more effective than other leaders. And that boils down to where, of course, their core beliefs, their values, how emotionally intelligent they are, how they're able to relate to people, execute, get results, all of those things. But what are some of those proven behaviors that, when demonstrated and when applied over and over again, actually lead to a leader's ability to be effective in leading others, in driving results, and gaining whatever level of success that it is that they want? Before we go into that, let me just set the backdrop here. I know I have a wide range of listeners, from individuals who are in corporate and they're starting the side hustle or thinking about it, to individuals who have started, who are in that beginning build stage, to individuals who this is not their first rodeo, so to speak. And so they've been at this for a while and they're now at a space where they're either looking to grow or to improve their effectiveness as leaders because their organizations are growing. So as you're growing, as you're in that space and you're in that mode of growth, you either have a team, or you'll need to hire a team, or you'll need to hire independent contractors, virtual assistants, you name it. And the truth of the matter is, in order for everything to flow in harmony, for deadlines to be met and for your team to excel so that your business can actually continue to scale and make the impact that you want, it's important that you develop strong leadership skills. I talked about this a few weeks back in a prior episode in terms of what it takes to be an effective leader. And so I would definitely invite you to go back and listen to it if you haven't heard it. But the short version of it is essentially your job as the CEO or top executive in your organization is really to hold space for being a big picture visionary and inspiring your team to work hard, meet their goals, and excel. But your job as a leader is also to do just that, to lead. So there is the space around what you're doing as the leader and as the CEO in terms of performance, in terms of making sure that the organization is healthy from a financial standpoint, resource standpoint. And then there's the piece around making sure that you have the people that you need in place. And then it's the third piece of making sure that these individuals are being developed, that they're being groomed, they're being given opportunities to grow and to expand for themselves and for the organization as well. That's high level what we talked about prior in terms of what it means to be a strong leader. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more of the details of what does that actually look like? How can we measure, literally, how can we measure how effective a person is as a leader? And what are some of those components, or in this case, competencies that allow us to measure? And so I'm just going to give you a really high level overview, because going into competencies, I could be here for hours, but this is just laying the foundation of what these competencies are and how they show up and the behaviors that you want to do a self-assessment and mirror moment to see, okay, am I demonstrating these particular competencies? And there are a slew of competencies that have been determined to measure the effectiveness of leaders, whether it be around the actual business and the work and the function. But what we're going to focus on today is primarily the competencies that speak to your ability to lead others, to lead and to influence others. So as we know, highly competent leaders, they do more than just perform at a high level, right? For the most part, we know how to work hard. We know how to get stuff done. But when you step into the role of the CEO, or as your organization grows and you're depending on others, you're going to find that it's going to be less and less about how effective you are in doing and more around how effective you are in getting others to do or inspiring others to do. So today, I'd like to share a few core leadership competencies focused on your effectiveness in leading others. And like I mentioned, there are a whole bunch, but these 10 have been researched and used globally as a benchmark for leadership effectiveness. These are in no particular order. So it doesn't mean that the ones that I say in the beginning are any more important than the ones at the end. Just in general, these 10, if you've ever done a 360-degree assessment, more than likely these 10 were part of the assessment in which your assessors assessed you. But first one up is compassion. As we know, in the time and space that we're in right now, the call for humanity to stand up and to support and to be caring and compassionate towards each other is greater than I think it's ever been before. And as a leader, as a CEO, this is a time to really have compassion for your employees and for yourself. Again, we're all human at the end of the day, and this has been a rough couple of years for us globally, collectively. And for some individuals, it's been even harder. So being mindful that your team right now, not only are they burnt out, not only are they maybe feeling isolated still, even though that the world is quote unquote starting to open again, that they are dealing with the prolonged trauma, if you will, of what's taken place over these last couple of years. So having compassion towards them, and of course, having compassion towards yourself. Next one up is likability. And this may seem odd because let's be honest, everyone has their definition of what it means to be likable, right? Someone can genuinely, authentically be themselves, and they are going to draw attention and admiration from a group of people, and another group of people are going to be like, "Oh my gosh, you suck and I don't like you." Likability is not necessarily being a doormat to your team, by no means, but it's really being mindful and being able to read the room, and to an extent adjusting how you approach individuals based on personality types or their way of being. At the end of the day, it's impossible to get everyone to like you. Not everyone is going to like you, but just being mindful, and this will go into a little bit more of the emotional intelligence piece, but just being mindful of how you're coming across and your awareness around being able to read the room and adjusting as needed. Next one up, number 3, is integrity. And this should be an obvious one. But leaders with integrity practice what they preach and they own up to their mistakes, right? So it's about if you are making promises to employees, to staff, to vendors, to whatever, that you are showing up in the capacity that you're supposed to. It is about being ethical. It is about being truthful. It is about being trustworthy and doing things that would build trust between you and others. Commitment. Your commitment is just as important as the commitment of your team. So making sure that you are showing up 110%, especially if your communication or your expectations of your team is that they show up 110%. The key here is to remember that whoever you have on your team, whether they're full-time employees, they're consultants, whether you bring on an outside agency, these people have signed up to help support you in achieving whatever mission you've established and driving forward to completion of the vision that you have. So making sure that you are just as much in the game as you are expecting them to be in the game. Next one up, number 5 here is sincerity. Don't say anything you don't mean, good or bad. I've been in environments, I've supported environments where I think the general desire was to be sincere, but in the fear of hurting people's feelings or on the other side of that, it's just a toxic environment. Some leaders have found themselves in a place where they're just trying to say what they think that they need to say in the moment to get things moving or to appease someone. But people are watching that and people can sense that and people can discern that. So making sure that your yes is a yes, your no is a no, that as a leader that you again are operating in integrity, you're not talking trash about your employees to other employees or just in the environment, just being again just being human but being sincere in the way that you communicate, in the way that you operate, in the way that you interact with others. Next one up, one of my faves is courage. I'll share at one point of why courage has become such a pillar and powerful anchor for me. So when it comes to courage, this is not going to look the same for everyone, right? Courage can show up in, hey, I'm going to start my business. I'm going to take the leap. I'm going to leave corporate and start my business. Courage can show up in the sense of, I need to grow my business and I need to add more team members and I need to hire and I need to train and I need to trust people to do the work, right? Courage shows up in many different ways. Courage also shows up in conversations, giving your team members feedback when things aren't working well, and being able to do that in a way that is respectful and dignified. And so I can do a whole nother episode on courage, but just want to lay that down that every day as leaders, every day as CEOs, I don't know about you, but I am faced with a decision or a challenge or an opportunity that requires me to, one, address whatever comes up. And then two, if there's fear there, if there's reservation, if there's hesitation in any capacity, really digging deep to identifying, well, what is it that's stopping me? And then tapping into what I like to call my inner well of courage to be able to move forward. Next up is talent development. And so obviously as a leader, your effectiveness is rated on whether or not you can get other people to get work done so that you can, reach the results that you want to. But there are so many different ways to do that. And so if you've ever heard of the term command and control, which is a very old school way of leading others in the sense of, hey, I'm in charge or I'm at this level and you need to do what I said that you need to do just cuz. The flip side of that is inspiring or influencing other people to actually take action. But when it comes to talent development, in this particular context, it's really around, can you help develop people into being greater than where they are today? Can you take action that allows someone to enhance their skill set, to build their confidence, to grow and to step into higher levels within their organization? Everyone has different experiences. I've certainly had leaders who were good at managing the day to day, but when it came to my own growth or when it came to my own development, I was completely on my own. And so the leaders that I hold near and dear and that I continue to engage with and keep in touch with are the ones who did a little bit more than just manage the day to day. They inspired me, they challenged me, they pulled things out of me that I couldn't even see in myself. So, as you think about talent development, it's not just about getting people to get work done. How are you helping them to grow and develop? The seventh one is emotional savvy, or you can call this emotional intelligence. And this goes along with the compassion. And this is really around understanding emotions. This starts with you first. So the awareness of your own emotions in certain situations, and then also being able to recognize the emotions of others and responding accordingly. The work of emotional intelligence really isn't seen externally. And what I mean by that is much of that work starts with you. Think about it. How many times have we gotten an email that might trigger us? Whether something didn't work out right, or there's a deadline that's going to be missed, or a customer or a client is unhappy, right? And immediately we start to feel emotions. When you're at that level of having a high EQ, it's really being one, able to address the fact that, okay, I'm feeling some type of way. And the next step is identifying what is it that I'm feeling. And once you've identified what it is that you're feeling, you get to choose, how do I want to feel instead? When you're in that place of having identified, having gotten clarity, having dealt with whatever emotion, then moving forward and addressing that person. Because at some point in that process, and I didn't go into this, but at some point in that process, there is a level of detachment that happens where it's no longer about your emotions, but it brings you into that place of being a lot more empathetic towards that person's emotions and why they may have reacted, so that when you have the conversation, you're not in trigger mode, but you can meet them where they are. Ninth one up is communication. When it comes to communication, this goes back to what I've spoken about before. Are you able to communicate your vision? Are you able to clearly communicate what needs to get done? Are you able to clearly communicate feedback? When things aren't going right, are you able to just say more than, I don't like it, or this doesn't feel good? But are you able to use your communication skills to help others understand what it is that you're thinking or what it is that you want? On the flip side of that is leveraging your ability to listen, because that's part of communication as well. Ask questions and come from a place of curiosity so that your employees can feel heard, and whoever you work with, quite frankly, can feel like what they have to say matters and that they are understood. And then lastly is inspiration. If you want to be effective, really truly effective, and get the best out of people, that requires the ability to inspire others. With the command and control, it was rooted in fear and it was rooted in intimidation and manipulation. Yeah, sure, you could get people to do what it is that they needed to do. But when you can inspire someone, when you can help them see how, them doing X has an impact on Y, you will get 100 times more output from your employees and your staff versus, hey, go do this because I said so. To recap, the 10 core competencies that are focused specifically around your effectiveness in leading others is compassion, likability, integrity, commitment, courage, talent development, emotional savvy or emotional intelligence, communication, and inspiration. And then I just like to add a few things onto this list as you think about holistically. All right, now I know and understand the competencies. Now I can do a self-evaluation on how effective I think I am in those particular 10 areas. But then I just want to add a couple things here. So at the end of the day, this goes back to that communication competency. Be clear with your employees, your contractors, your vendors, your referral partners, your network, whoever it is. Being clear with people is first and foremost. But when it comes to those who support you and who are working to drive forward the mission of your organization, it's important that you share with them exactly how they're doing. You can utilize 360 reviews. Typically, when it comes to 360s, these are implemented, especially in the larger organizations, these are implemented at the leadership level and then maybe like mid management level. I wouldn't necessarily say that you would have to go around giving, especially if you're like a team of 5, go around giving everyone a 360, but it might be something that you think about if someone is ready to get promoted into their first leadership role, right? Let's take a pulse, not just by what you've observed as their leader, but what have their peers observed, or what have people that they've worked with closely observed as well. The other piece around communication is to really ask for feedback from your team. This is a two-way street, right? As leaders, we are always in growth mode, not just focused on the business, but in terms of who we are as individuals. And it's very easy to lose sight, or better yet, never have sight of our own blind spots. And depending on how large your organization is, or depending on the structure, individuals, employees are usually a lot less likely to point out your blind spots. Why? Because you're the CEO or you're the leader in the organization, and they don't want to do anything that would jeopardize their livelihood. So the encouragement here is to be proactive as the leader in creating that space, and not just saying, hey, if I do something wrong, just come and tell me. People are going to hear that and they're going to be like, okay, yeah, no, I'm not going to come and tell you. But really creating opportunities and asking specific questions, especially if you're wanting to understand, how well you do at giving feedback, right? Don't just put it out there and say, hey, let me know if I'm doing good at giving feedback. That's not as helpful. But you could sit with people one-on-one and say, hey, when I've given feedback in the past, has that been effective, or has that been clear to you? Really creating the space and then leading them. And then the real important piece here is that you temper your reaction to the feedback. You can shut down getting feedback that would actually help you grow if you have an emotional reaction to the person giving you feedback. Imagine the courage that it takes an employee to come to their boss, or to their boss's boss, or to the CEO and say, hey, when you did this, it caused that. And this was the challenge with that, right? It takes a lot of courage for them to step up and say that, especially if you've created that open door. Please do not shut that door by having an emotional reaction, at least not in front of them, right? So going back to the emotional intelligence, take a moment, sit with the feedback, really think through it, deal with your emotions, and then respond accordingly. Because what you don't want is an organization that has a whole bunch of people who are afraid to tell the CEO the truth, because that's going to create productivity issues, morale issues. That's how most of these toxic organizations that many of us have worked in, that's how it starts. That the leadership is just not open to feedback, or they claim they were open to feedback, and when they got it, they had a negative reaction or there was retaliation. Couple more tips here that I want to add. Maintain your vision at all costs. being an effective leader is really showing your people that you have a big vision for your brand or your company and that you're actively taking steps to make it happen. So keeping the vision and the mission at the forefront, not just something that's hung on the walls or in your marketing materials, but reinforcing it as often as possible. The next one up is really learn from your failures, right? We all have failures, even my type A's, as much as we don't like them, we have failures. And so I've adopted the mindset that failure is information. And so for me, in cases where in the past where I probably would have just lost it, or let's be truthful, I've lost it when something didn't, go as planned. I've learned to really, again, process the emotions, right? I can still be emotional. I can still be upset. I can still be disappointed. But then having that moment to really sit with it and understand, okay, what is this failure teaching me? What are some of the lessons learned? How can I take this information to improve? And as you do that, you can create the space within your organization so that if, let's just say, your team member misses a deadline or they worked on a project and it didn't work out well, right? Instead of chastising or even sweeping it under the rug and saying, hey, it's okay, it's whatever, you can challenge them to say, okay, what did you learn from this process? What will you do differently? Or how have you been able to grow as a result of this particular failure? And so as we wrap up here, I just want to finish on the note that we're in this situation where employees are leaving organizations, and that mirror has really come up for a lot of leaders, a lot of CEOs all over the country who haven't necessarily always prioritized or really put at the forefront their employees or their human capital over their profits and their bottom line. And so you have to really keep in mind that your human capital, the people who support you, the people who are there to help you achieve and drive forward towards your vision, they're the most important differentiator in your organization. And so really making sure that you are identifying and hiring the right people, that you are cultivating a culture that is aligned with who you are, your values, and of course that of the people that are there and that are actually going to support where you're trying to head, and that you're developing these individuals. Because at the end of the day, as we know, and we probably always known, but this time has definitely proven it, people have options, people have choices, and people aren't willing to stay in negative environments or toxic environments or environments that challenge their psychological safety as much as they might have 5, 10, 15 years ago. And so that's what I have for you today as it relates to really digging a little bit more deeper on what that foundation and what those competencies are to really improve or highlight your effectiveness as a leader. Of course, as always, I would love to hear how these competencies, if this is the first time that you're hearing it, how they've changed the way that you think about your own company and your brand and how you operate and are showing up, and anything that you might implement. And now that we've had this conversation, please feel free to DM me at Sabine Gedeon on IG or on LinkedIn. Would love to hear what shifted for you or any ahas. And of course, as always, I thank you so much for those who have subscribed and who download consistently every week. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for those who have left reviews. We've gotten some amazing reviews thus far. If you, again, are listening for the first time, or you've only listened to a couple episodes and haven't yet gone on Apple Podcasts or even Spotify, I ask that you would consider going on, rating the show, leaving a review, giving me some feedback, letting me know how this content has helped or is helping to support you as you really own your leadership identity and your role as CEO and leader in your organization. So with that, I will leave you. Have a fabulous rest of the week, and I will be back next week. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of She Leads Now. Be sure to join us next week for another transformative discussion to help you grow, develop, and embody the courageous leader you've always been. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get alerts when new episodes drop, and join us for our next Leaders Lounge meetup on Zoom. Details and dates for future sessions are included in the show notes below, so take a look there or head over to sabinegedeon.com/lounge to register and hold your spot for the next session. Again, that's sabinegedeon.com/lounge to grab your spot. Excited to connect with you all inside the lounge. Talk to you soon.